Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Kate, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary.
I know this is going to be a wonderful conversation because we get to talk about you and this new book that you have coming out. And the title, I think, is going to resonate with a lot of people because they're going to wonder how you deliver on it. And the title is Unbreakable: How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders, which unfortunately many have had that experience, but I am getting ahead of myself. We're going to eventually get to that discussion. But before we get there, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
That is an interesting story. My very first job was actually a company that I started. When I was in high school, I founded an international French horn trading company. And I spent all of high school and college finding French horns all around the world and selling them to symphony musicians, conservatory students all over the US. And it was such a cool experience, and that I got to talk to many phenomenal musicians, understand how they saw the world, but it also really taught me sales, marketing, how do you connect with your customers? How do you think about accounting and arbitrage, everything like that?
I have so many questions. I'm assuming you play or played the French horn. Is this how you got into it, or how did this start?
That's right. When I was about 10 years old, I started training at a local conservatory in French horn performance. And when I was 13 or 14, my parents and I decided to buy my own instrument. And at the time, I was living in Ohio, and there were no sellers of high quality French horns within a 10-hour drive.
Mm.
I think my dad had to drive to northern Michigan. And so, the instrument you play is very important as a conservatory musician. And so we said, well, why don't we just buy five or six of them and I'll keep which one I like the best and we'll sell the rest. And what we discovered was that there was a huge market need for instruments in the geography. And it was really, really fun to learn how the different instruments were made, what were the different flavors of sound that come out of them and everything like that.
So, as a young person, right? So it just sort of fell into it. But it's one thing to see, oh, this is a need. We had this need. But then it's a lot of work, right? I can just imagine all of the work to get this started and then doing it.
Yes, it was a lot of work. I essentially had a probably 20 plus hour a week job all the way through high school and college. But it was also something that was meaningful to me, helping the local musician community, helping the local conservatory. And I recognized that I was learning really good skills for it. I ended up earning enough money that I was able to pay for the entirety of my college tuition. And because my dad is a entrepreneur and small business owner, it was kind of in my blood that, when you see something that the world needs, you kind of have a responsibility to go out there and solve it. And that's what's happened with every company that I founded. I think guess I'm now on my fourth company, and when the world needs something doing and I'm there and can fix it, it's hard for me to resist.
Yeah, we're all built differently, right? And so that entrepreneurial spirit of seeing whatever the need is, and then trying to figure out how to fill that gap, how to come alongside whatever needs to happen. So when you went to college, did you major in music or in business or both, or what did you major in?
I actually started out majoring in international relations and engineering. I graduated with a degree in international politics and Chinese. But throughout college, I founded two companies in college and was working on those the whole time I was there. And then ended up going straight into the business world, working for McKinsey and Company because I wanted to be trained in a harder toolkit than I had to offer just from my variety of business experiences.
So how did you find that transition from at this point starting three businesses and a variety, you sound to me as somebody who's interested in a lot of things, right? So, which is wonderful because in order to be successful in business, right? If you're just focused on one aspect and that's where your wheelhouse is, it's going to be hard to pivot to see to that creativeness that is needed to solve whatever problem is in front of you. So how did your majors and the businesses help you in that first career?
Yeah, well, you could think of me as an interdisciplinary systems thinker.
Hmm.
And so when I graduated, I had studied computer science, physics, biology, comparative politics, sociology, psychology, because I was always one of those students taking too many classes. And that meant that when I entered McKinsey, they could essentially drop me into any business, which they did, around the country and say, go, figure out the root cause here, then figure out how to solve the problem. And sometimes it would be people problems. Maybe people weren't trained correctly. Sometimes it would be financial problems. The books weren't set up right. Sometimes it would be something related to their manufacturing, which would engage my engineering knowledge. And this is actually what allowed me to write my book is, I'm a lay expert in trauma psychology. I have a degree in comparative politics, and I have, 30 years of experience of dealing with these types of leaders. And I find it's really when you marry knowledge across disciplines that new insight happens, innovation happens. And I think it served me well when I was at Meta and in venture capital as well.
It is really, we can give an ode to doing one thing and doing it really well and how you can dig in and you see certain things when you're just, if you're a musician and that is the main thing that you do and you spend decades focused on that, you're going to excel in a certain kind of way, right? And then of course there's what you get when you have this variety of experience, because then as you said, you can pull from all these different um, aspects and experiences to create what is needed for this particular situation. Because every situation has these foundations that are normal, but then you have the particularity, which takes being present and creative for those people, for that place at that time. And so being able to draw on all of that must have been just very helpful.
I think it's really important. And what you're saying about being present is important too. My very first job, which taught me how to really deeply listen to what the customer's pain points are, is what built the foundation for all of my future jobs. Because when you can really listen and build a view of the big picture, you have a much stronger idea of what types of levers you can pull.
Mm. I think that is so important because sometimes we go into a situation and we imagine what the pain point is, we imagine what the solution is, and so we sort of like skim over what the person in front of us is saying. And so what I imagine the situation is or what's problematic may be different from what the person sees or needs, like what's important to them. And so if you don't spend that time, you can be solving a real problem, but it's not the problem that is most important to them or that they really need help with because maybe they have some other way to tackle that or that's a future issue for them.
Yeah, I run a business now as a CEO coach working with mission-driven, underrepresented founders in Silicon Valley. And what I always tell them is that I'm there to be their objective sounding board. I have no vested interest in the outcome, but it's more important that they're working with me so that they have a space where they can hear their own voice and the answers they already have inside them. Than
Mhm.
that they hear me talk.
Yeah.
For example, I was working with a CEO last week. And he came in with a problem of he only had half of the C-suite that other companies had. He kept firing C-suite members that weren't working out. And I could have come in as an advisor and said, well, you need to hire this type of person, or, your comp incentives aren't good enough. But I let him listen to himself, and his answer was that his company was actually running really well on half of a C-suite, and he didn't need the three roles that everyone kept telling him that he had. And if you don't give people the space to really tell you what sounds right to them, sometimes they never get to the best answer.
Mm. Yeah, that is because yeah, it is one of those things of stepping back and not especially for those of us who are helpers, right? We want to help. We get in these kind of consulting businesses because we really want to see people thrive and individuals and organizations succeed. And so we do see things, right? If you, my background's in philosophy, and um, as a philosopher, it is system building, but it is a lot of deconstruction, right? Give me any argument, I can tell you what's wrong with it. Um, and or what I think is wrong with it, right? But that's the catch, right? What I see is many times largely irrelevant if I haven't spent that first time. Well, what do they see? Right. And I also agree, most people have they already they know something is bothering them or something isn't working and they have an intuition as to what's going on. But if you don't allow them for them to find it, the quote unquote fix is not going to be as good or grand or fixing as when they supply it themselves.
Yeah, if I you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he can create his own solutions forever. It's kind of the same thing. If
Mhm.
I come in as a consultant and I say, these are the 5 things wrong with your company, go do these things to fix it, the company might do 30% of them. But if I can work with the company's leadership and they design their own solutions, they're going to want to execute 100% of them because they're excited. They feel
Right.
the ownership, and that's what gets me excited.
So let me ask you a bit of a practical question. First, well, let me ask this. Have you ever been or do you struggle with being like a fixer, like you want to go in and fix things and impose in a way, like this is the problem I see, this is what needs to happen. So that's my question. Do you struggle with that? And if you do, how do you how do you then tell yourself this is not appropriate at this time with this situation and this client?
When I first started my career, I was like that, and I was working at a firm that taught me to be like that. McKinsey is all about coming in, seeing things other people don't see in problems, then designing really rigorous solutions and making sure that they happen.
Mhm.
And so it's really hard, when you're working 80 hours as a consultant every week to turn that off, right? Some people might say that, especially when I was younger, I seem more like a guy because, like, I would be around my friends and they'd be like, I'm having all these problems. And I'd be like, we'll just change these 3 things, your problem will go away. It was through my own coaching and my own therapy and kind of the process of growing up that I learned that it's much more powerful to just be present and have deep lines of inquiry
Mhm.
than to tell people what to do.
Mhm.
But I still tell people what to do a little bit. With my early stage founders, I do about 50% coaching, which is inquiry, and 50% advising. Because if they're a first-time founder, they don't actually know best practices enough to know what they should be doing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, there's the trap of falling one way or the other, right? But it's the particularity of the individual. What is needed now? Where is this person now? Um, and then of course the question is, am I available to give to that person what it is that they need? So where did you go after McKinsey?
Yeah, so after McKinsey, in my last year at McKinsey, I was doing corporate venture work for them. I realized I really liked working with startups still, so I moved out to Silicon Valley and I joined an AI startup as chief of staff. It was a very cool role. I had a bird's eye view on the company. I was really able to understand how founders profoundly influence culture and what it looks like when you have a good CEO versus a bad CEO.
So what are some of the basic, well, not basic, maybe more nuanced qualities that the the successful versus the unsuccessful CEO has?
Well, it depends on the context and the environment. But the the most common mistakes I see with CEOs, especially in startups, is they try to have too many products too early. They split the company's focus across 20 things when they should be doing 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
Companies sometimes are built in the founder's image. So let's say you have a founder who used to be an engineer, he'll hire 20 engineers, no one in sales or product or ops. Um, and then you get to the more interpersonal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a bad CEO might say, this is my way or the highway. Like, when I'm here, like, if I say something, you need to jump and go do it. I'm all powerful. I can do whatever I want, like pounding on their chest, gorilla style. Um, Good CEOs know that leadership is much more about listening. It's about charting a clear path and saying, these are the three places I want to go. I've hired the right people. I'm going to empower you to get there. Whatever you can't do that you need me to do, I will do as fast as I can and then get out of your way. And so I tend to think of that as more strengths-based leadership or servant leadership, which is driven by a leader being secure in themselves,
Mhm.
saying, I don't have to be relevant anywhere. I can trust enough, I don't have to micromanage. And I have enough belief in my team that they're going to follow the values that I set for them and do what's right, even when I'm not there.
Mhm. Versus what you were describing before was maybe a version of command and control, right? Where you've got this more older school hierarchical, I'm the boss, shut up and follow what I do. So sort of like the leader and then the minions, which um, largely the workforce today is not as interested in that, right? We want to be contributors and we want to, when we think about engagement, what drives engagement? How are you going to get your best out of the people around you, which is um, helping them, trusting them, as you said, these are the things that I want to do. How are we going to get there? And then allowing people that you've hired well to then be engaged in the process and be creative and really take advantage of all the diversity of thought and experience in the room.
What we're seeing right now is a huge amount of tension
Mm,
because you have a workforce that wants what you're describing. But this style of like fear-based leadership is not old school right now. It's in vogue.
mm,
It's like those bell-bottom jeans that came back in the last few years. We're seeing Mark Zuckerberg say, this is the year of efficiency. I'm cutting the bottom 20%, get in line or get out. We're seeing people who want to be like Elon, who want to be like Sam Altman, who say, I'm going to be the world's first trillionaire. Like everyone fall in line behind me. And from my perspective, when I started my career, about 3 in 10 of the leaders I encountered were fear-based. In the last 5 years, I've seen closer to 7 in 10.
mm,
And I don't think that's because leadership has changed. I think it's because we're in a new era of permissiveness for bad behavior, where it's
mm,
kind of gloves are off. I don't have to pretend to care anymore.
mm.
Even Satya Nadella, who used to be seen as, a caring people leader, is having employees die at his desk and like it's no big deal. And so that's why I ended up writing my book.
I think that's a really good point. When you read, there's one thing about reading about best practices in business and belonging. And I was just reading an article today about the loneliness epidemic and how do we really get engagement and how do we really, if this is what our goal is, what are the best practices to get there? And it is all of these things that we were talking about. And yet, I also, in practice, see this whatever kind of leader, whatever kind of leadership there is, this like once they get into that position, it's this sort of clamp down. And I think fear from some of those leaders too, that if, the buck stops with me, and so I'm going to have to micromanage and control everything so that I can be in control of and get this kind of outcome, which is counterproductive if you want something like psychological safety, if you want a healthy work environment, if you want an environment that is fit for humans to thrive and flourish and be treated baseline dignity and respect. So I agree, there's been this turn which is counter to best practices. Do you think the turn is mirroring what's going on in the larger global scope of politics or what is that how you account for this turn?
Yeah. So we're seeing this across all sections of society. We're seeing this in media, right?
Mhm.
Game of Thrones, Billions, House of Cards. These are all about rigid, top-down, hierarchical, cruelty-based leaders. In politics, on both sides of the aisle, you're seeing people like Andrew Cuomo clawing their way back to power. You're also seeing people like our current administration in power that are saying it's my way or the highway. I want to posture strength. I want to posture control. And in business, we're seeing the same thing. I can't tell you how many friends, clients in Silicon Valley come to me saying, I am stuck jumping from the frying pan into the fire. I'm going from company to company, and every place is really bad in its own way right now. And,
Mhm.
I've had 30 different managers in my career. Eight of them have been fear-based leaders, and um, I don't want that, for my friends, my family, for the people I'm in society with. But, I saw a certain inevitability in it. It's starting to become really inescapable. And when that's the case, you have to build people a toolkit to thrive under the adversity because
Mhm.
it's not always possible to easily step out of it.
Yeah. In fact, for most people, the reality is that they aren't able to at this time move locations, move jobs, for many different reasons. And so that sort of solution of find another place. I too talked to people who found another place, was not greener, right? Um, and and many people just aren't able to move. So I want to talk with your book about your book, but I want to ask you this question about how about yourself and how you deal with conflict. So would you be willing to tell us about a time maybe earlier in your career that you encountered a conflict and how you dealt with it, and then maybe how you might deal with it differently now?
Yeah, I think so. So I've dealt with a variety of intense conflicts in my career. Um, I grew up in a home that had a lot of conflict, so I was relatively prepared for that. Um, but what I think people underestimate is that even at the best companies, you see um, really off the wall behavior. So at every major company I've worked at, I've seen illegal things.
Mm,
And the way I approached that in my first job is very different than the way I approached it in my last job.
mm,
So in my first job, I was working at a company where I found a manager was committing blackmail.
mm,
Um, and at the time, I was fresh out of college. That really concerned me.
mm,
One of my other colleagues was being threatened. She was devastated and upset by it. And so when review time came around, I slammed this manager in his reviews. I reported to the ombud. And I said, hey, there's something really serious going on here, and this is a liability for the company. Um, and I quickly learned that systems don't reward that.
mm,
The ombud told me, you're not seeing what you think you are. Shut up and take it. You need to get used to how the business world works, which,
mm.
not how you would normally see an ombud. Ombud isn't HR, they're supposed to be neutral.
Right.
And then, my leader who was running my reviews slammed me back. They
Mm,
said, you're not a team player. We don't care if you're seeing illegal things. You need to learn how to be a cog in the machine.
mm,
And if you don't get it, you need to get out.
mm,
And so I think that that's where you start to see me saying, okay, these companies that say, I'm ethical, I have values, this is important to me, you quickly realize, not so much. The
mhm,
companies reward the profit centers. If you threaten the profit centers, you're going to get threatened back.
mm,
And that's when I started to apply some of my toolkits from growing up in a home that had a ton of fear-based leadership to the business world. And how I started to deal with things started to change.
mm. I would say also, like with your experience, when we think about an organization, right? Uh, if you have a large, well, it doesn't have to be too large to have two people working there have very different experiences because the team that they're on, you could have one team that is just on fire and another team that's doing great and really for each other and having a golden experience with each other because of this particular group of professionals that is working together and thriving. And you so it, you never really know what you're going to get. Like And it can shift too, right? People come in and people go out. And so it can be having a toolkit because you don't know what is going to, where you're going to be landing or what's around the corner is so important because conflict is going to happen. Conflict is normal. So how are we going to deal with it? And you're going to have really difficult situations at work. Of course, we're going to have difficult situations at work. And so knowing how to deal with that. So tell us a little bit more exactly about why you decided to write this book and what's in it.
Of course. So just to address your previous point, in my book, I actually talk about good pockets and bad pockets.
Mhm.
And I give a toolkit of how you diligence to find the good pockets and how you avoid the bad pockets, which is really important.
Yes.
Um, I started to write this book in February of this year. Um, and I started to write it because my clients and my peers, who are super accomplished people, Yale PhDs, Stanford MBAs, people with years of experience in top organizations, were spinning out. They were overwhelmed, they were freezing, they were watching kind of the world order shift at the same time that this fear-based wave was hitting the private sector, and they were not having a good time. And it was around that time that I realized, oh my God, like I'm fine, and they are not fine,
Mm,
which means I have skills that they don't have. So, how do I teach them those skills as fast as humanly possible so that they can protect themselves and the people and initiatives they care about?
mm,
And so I originally started writing a Substack that quickly became book length that is digestible, short lessons in how do these types of leaders think?
mm,
How do they make their choices? Why are they super, super predictable? And
mm,
then once you can predict what they're going to do, how do you run circles around them?
mm,
Because these types of leaders really rely on making people scared, making people cower. But if you say, I see you, you're weak, you're immature, you're trying to bully people. I can't be bullied. And I know how to deal with people like you. It totally changes the game. And so
mm.
my goal with my book is to activate people's agency by giving them the skills that they need to navigate around these really challenging environments.
That sounds, that's definitely music to my ears because I'm just at base of what I do with conflict resolution is personal empowerment. Because the only thing that you can shift is yourself, which is a wonderful, wonderful story because I can change my story, my narrative about myself, right? I can either be the victim of the bullying, or I love that as you decide, well, I'm not playing that game. I can, there's a variety of things that I can do. And so the question is, well, what can I do? How do I develop? How do I recognize somebody who's lacking in emotional intelligence? And so the issue is them. Bad behavior is always about the person. It's not about me. So, but when it's coming at you and you still have to feed your kids, pay your mortgage, there's all that fear that's baked into if I lose my job, I need that money. And so not only the fear of somebody treating me badly, all of that's wrapped up in that, but when it's wrapped up in money and paying, being gainfully employed, it's this really compacted sort of feeling of being trapped and disempowered. So what kinds of tools do you have that you could share with the audience?
Definitely. So, the first thing that people have to understand is that these leaders tell you a lot of lies. They say, you're powerless, you're nothing without me. Like, if you stand up to me, like, I will destroy you. It's like classic evil villain monologuing BS. But a lot of people have never been around people like that before, and so it can really shake them. So the first thing people need to understand is that you're not powerless, you're powerful. And then you first, to be able to use these tactics, you have to understand how to take care of yourself in these environments so that you have the energy and wherewithal to do it. That comes with learning how to protect your energy and learning how to be resilient. So my book covers some of the easiest ways that you can protect your energy and some of the easiest ways that you can boost your resilience. And then we get into how do you deal with these types of people? The very first thing you have to know is that these people use information for manipulation. So you cannot share any real information about what you care about around them. Even innocuous things. Oh my God, I'm so excited for my kids' Little League game on Friday. You don't say that around them because guess what? They're going to make you work late on Friday. Um, you don't mention that you're really excited for your upcoming vacation because guess what? They're going to make you work during that vacation. Um, and so then when you do share information, it has to be very strategic. Let's say you really want one initiative to be approved. Well, peer-based leaders don't like to approve initiatives. They don't like feeling like people are getting the things they want. So what you actually have to do is come in with three initiatives, two that you don't want and one that you do. And then you use your sacrifice initiatives to settle for the third one, which is the one that you actually want. And you may notice this is a really different way of thinking
Mhm.
about how you be in a workplace, but it's the best way to protect what you care about.
Gosh, as I'm listening to you, I think, yeah, but these people shouldn't be in leadership, right? Like we want leadership is in the people business, and you need to know how to care for people in order to. Yeah, I fall back into this what should be, and then that is certainly something a story that I'm always have to align of what should be, what I think should be, and what is, right? And I'm a big believer in dealing with what is, right? Well, this is a goal, or this is good behavior, civil behavior. And yet, this is the behavior that we currently have. And how do we move forward? And I would say, I mean, I want to say, like, why do these people get in power? But I know why these people get in power, right? We all know why they get in power because they have certain skill sets that are very valuable to the organization and a certain people skills that they have and a certain kind of value that is seen by what who they report to as seeing as being valuable.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Um, And what I'm seeing these days is that not all leaders in these positions start out like that. They're feeling pressure from their environments to become like that.
Mhm.
And like that's why I'm like, oh my God, this book has to be in the world because I don't want more people to feel like they have to become like this. But what I notice about the way you talk about work environments is that it's very people-centric. What you have to understand about fear-based leaders is that they don't like that they're people working for them. They wish they could all be machines.
Mhm.
They don't want to deal with the messiness of humanity. This is why you see fear-based leaders are always firing people who take medical leaves, maternity, paternity leaves, because they see any form of weakness or showing human emotion, human range of compassion, empathy. They see that as weak and intolerable. And they wish that they could literally just be running a factory of actual cogs and wheels. And so it's totally antithetical to leadership best practices. There is no such thing as psychological safety if leadership doesn't believe in people having psychological needs, right? Um, and so that's where I come in with my clients, helping them not be like this, saying being a CEO is a slippery slope to becoming an asshole. How do you not become an asshole? And when they're surrounded by other leaders who are telling them that their goal is to be as extractive as possible, use up the humans, doesn't matter if they die. You're seeing a lot of people die at their desks in Silicon Valley right now. Um, it's a very different way of thinking.
Yeah. It's so, I guess because I'm so sold into my way of thinking about how we treat people, that we're people first and workers somewhere down the line, and that we do want good industry because that's good for society and it's good for the individuals, but that all business is there to serve people. It's not people are there to serve business, right? And business is good. You know, we can talk about whether or not we should be having these ginormous conglomerates. I don't know if those are really good, but there are arguments to be made. But if we don't keep the primacy of individuals, then everybody suffers. And do you talk at all about in your book, or maybe this, a book can't do everything about the organizational structures that need to shift so that these people don't have this kind of power?
Yeah. So I'm writing a second book that covers a lot more about that.
Hmm.
Um, it's taking everything that I teach to my CEOs about how do you be a human-centered, caring, thoughtful, intentional, strategic people leader. Someone who gets the best results and the most innovative types of businesses out into the world because you care about activating, preserving human potential and autonomy. Um, that's something I'm actively writing about, and in my Substack, I do publish on things like that weekly. But that book is kind of like a wishful thinking book. Because that's not where we are right now. You know, your approach is actually most reflected in European business climates.
Mm.
European business is much more human-centered. It's much more life first, work second. And right now in North America, we really aren't seeing that. In fact, one of the first things that I talk about in my book is that the way that you're conceiving of individuals is not the way fear-based leaders conceive of individuality. So they don't believe in inequality. They don't think that equality should exist. They do not think that their entry-level employees are equal to them as human beings. Um, they think that, they're in top, they're in the power, the rules don't apply to them, and you're either above them or below them. There's no such thing as being equal. And
Mm.
so that's why you see they're always stepping on the people below them, and they're always showing a smiling face to the people above them. But it's so antithetical to what best business practices say. It's so antithetical to what, you know, organizational psychology says. And I'm like, yikes. We're going to lose out on a generation's worth
Mm.
of innovation, a generation's worth of, human capital because this leadership is what's in vogue right now.
Mm. I mean, it almost sounds like you are describing as you said at the beginning, sort of like this villain, right? I can see, it twizzling their, mustache because it just sounds so crazy. I mean, I think power is transitory. You happen to have power right now, and then you don't have power the next day, and then it goes and comes and goes. Or we are, um, you know, it, it's uh, it's hard to hear. So clearly, not all leaders are like this. And I think it's going to be different in different sectors. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with a psychoanalyst who deals with narcissism and narcissism at work. And he was saying that, you've got a certain percent of the populations, but it does show up more in certain industries. So do you think this maybe resurgence of this kind of fear-based leadership is more prominent in some sectors than others, or am I just an eternal optimist that this isn't everywhere?
No, you're right. Um, it is the worst in sharp-elbowed sectors, which is where I have spent a lot of time. Um, I think finance is very bad. The defense industry is very bad for this. Right now, Silicon Valley is big tech is very bad with this. Um, but a lot of these industries are kind of bellwether industries.
Hmm.
People are reading books about Steve Jobs. They want to read the books of the head of JP Morgan. And when they read them, this is what they find. The industries I have found that have the least amount of this type of leadership tend to be consensus-driven cultures. Higher ed, not-for-profits, um, education, just generally. Um, a lot of the spaces that are female-dominated industries have less of this, not none of this, but less of this. Um, and so there are kind of safe havens that you can flock to if that's where you want to go. But I think that what's maybe really hard for you to process about this is that you're a really emotionally mature person. You can see the big picture. You probably think long term. You think collectively about what's best for the world, not just what's best for yourself. But most of these leaders are really emotionally stunted. They stopped their emotional maturation at 2 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old. And so when you say they sound like a villain, it's because, they're modeling things after very simplistic constructs that make sense to, how an 8-year-old would conceive of power.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and so the thing with emotional intelligence, which I think is good to hear, is that uh, it can continue to grow, right? So you can be stunted, but through work, through therapy, through a variety of different avenues, if somebody wants to develop, of course, they first have to see that there's a lack and that there's a need for it and why it would benefit them and others. But we're not stuck. It's not like IQ where you are sort of pretty much where you are. But with emotional intelligence, it is a skill that can be developed over time. Um, so I think that is good news that people aren't a done deal. And somebody could be misbehaving at a certain time and we all misbehave at different times in our life, but there's a possibility of doing something different. And I would imagine that one way to help another person, even if you report to them, is by how you show up, right? And so how you decide to model your values and who you are, and by not giving in to um, unreasonable and I would say immoral when you treat people badly is not morally okay to treat people badly. So if you model that to them, that actually might or may not, but it could help affect a change in them so that they see that maybe there is something different to be done.
Yes, definitely. I have several thoughts on that. So, first, I'm a walking example of that. I was raised by fear-based parents to be the next fear-based kingpin in a dynasty of fear-based leaders.
Mm,
And I said, no, this isn't working for me. It hurts the people around me, and I don't like it. I'm
mm,
going to learn to be different. And because I was raised to be really cruel from a really young age, that meant that I had to put myself through what I call a remedial people school. Um, I had to go through thousands of hours of therapy
mm,
to be taught, what does it look like to be patient, caring, kind, considerate, because I didn't know any of that growing
mm,
up. And so you can always choose a different path, even if everyone is telling you this has to be your path. And then let's see, for people who are going to choose differently, um, sorry, what was the last part of your question?
Well, I suppose it was just the possibility of if you show up to work and you don't change your values because somebody else is misbehaving, you could model up, right? Manage up in a
Yes.
way. May not quote unquote work, but we're not in charge of anybody else. We're only in charge of ourselves.
I remember what I was going to say. So this is actually why my book is called Unbreakable. Um, this is what I do in fear-based workplaces. I am like authentic, values-driven. I bend, I don't break. And I had a fear-based manager yell at me one time. And she was like, normally I just haze people for 2 months and then I can, but I've been hazing you for 10 months and I can't break you. I wish I could just make you suffer more in silence. And I was like, hey, you know what? Like, doesn't work on me. Like, I'm immune, like you can yell at me as much as you want. You can kick me as much as you want. Like, it has no impact on me. Case in point, I was walking down the street yesterday and someone was upset that I took a parking spot that they wanted. And this guy started screaming at me and he said, like, you're uncivilized. I hope you end up in a wheelchair. I hope 500-pound block falls from the sky, hits you on the head and kills you.
My
Um,
gosh.
yeah, I know, extreme, right? And like, it doesn't bother me at all. I went to the post office, came back out with my packages, and went home. And it may be that, my life has more extreme examples than most. But at the end of the day, I like myself. I love
Mm,
myself. I grade my success by whether I live my values.
mm,
And that means that other people don't determine my
mm,
success. They
mm,
don't determine my well-being. And anyone can learn to be like that.
Well, I certainly need more development in that. But is that inward turn, right? Where does your happiness, your joy lie, your self understanding and self-worth? If it is going to be external, that is a road. I mean, that is the road to away from those things, right? If it is your internal locus of control, like where is that? If it's in you, um, then those other things, I mean, I was jarred by listening to that. Like it's so sad to me when I see people publicly or otherwise misbehaving. It's just very sad that that person thinks that's an acceptable thing. I think what has gone on in that person's life that they think is acceptable to not only think those things, which is I think problematic, but then to verbalize that that goes away from community and from their own happiness, their own goodness. Um, so I'm sorry that happened
Yeah,
to you.
it's okay. When people do things like that to me, unless someone's like actively throwing something at me, which I don't enjoy, um, I um I feel concern for them,
Mhm.
right? And if you can learn to be around fear-based leaders and say, this person is really emotionally stunted. They did not receive the love that they needed as a child. They have
Mhm.
never been taught how to healthily connect with other people. They will never know the true meaning of equality if they continue on this path. I feel bad for them. I pity them. My life is full. I am loved and I love.
Mhm.
That's not an option for them. It shifts the dynamic
Mhm.
because people are only on a pedestal if you put them there.
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think nobody gets to embarrass you. You choose to be embarrassed, right? Because nobody is annoying you. You're choosing to be annoyed. And you might say, well, this sort of, tapping behavior, that is annoying. Well, no, that's my husband. He's a drummer. He taps away all the day long and he'll just join in with you, right? It's when we start seeing all the power we have. Um, so unbreakable. I love, that just it's an arresting word, right? And I think in particular in this context, because people feel so gaslit at work. I'm going here, like, why is this happening? I'm just going to work. Most people go to work because they want to do good work, get stuff done, hopefully have a good time, a healthy environment. And so when it's not just neutral, but the opposite of that, it can be so disjointing and like, what is going on? And unmooring. So this idea of centering and becoming unbreakable by those people who try to you use fear, right? Fear to try to get you in line, whatever that line is.
Yeah, and the very first chapters in my book talk about how to diversify your identity.
Mm,
Because I think what a lot of people really struggle with is some people are like, my job is my only source of my identity. I am a VP at this company. It is my thing. And so when people repeatedly threaten that aspect of their identity, it's almost like you only have one leg to your stool,
mm,
right? If someone cuts it out, you're going to fall over. And so I talk about you need to develop different sources of identity. It could be I am a mother, I am a gardener, I am a church volunteer, I am a writer, um, I am a pet owner, right? If you reiterate to yourself, I am 10 different things. If a fear-based leader takes away one of those things, I am still 9 things, right? And that can help people feel a little bit more tethered.
mm,
Because at the end of the day, like if your feet are on the floor, you can be grounded,
mm,
right? And fear-based leaders have power to an extent, but they don't have complete power over you.
mhm. That's lovely. I mean, that's so empowering. That message is so empowering. So have you had a leader or a mentor in your life that helped you grow and develop and treated you in this way that in this respectful, empowering way?
Definitely. I am very lucky in the people I've had in my life who are not my family. I have had incredible coaches. I have had wonderful therapists. I have industry mentors who look out for me, help guide me. Um, and what I would say to people who want that is seek it out,
Mm.
seek the very best. Um, Ask the three people that you most want as mentors if they'll be your mentor. And send them monthly updates, right? Set up a regular cadence of calls. If you don't have a coach, get a coach. If you don't have a therapist and can afford it, get a therapist. Um, if you don't have a tribe and you're feeling alone, you're allowed to go build a tribe.
Gosh, I love that so much. My last question, which I kind of feel like you just answered, but I'll let you answer it however you want to. So, when you look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all workers be treated with dignity and respect, but that people will be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
I think that the world needs to understand that what is best for their workers being healthy, happy, and fulfilled is also best for their bottom line. Um, because senior leaders are tasked with the bottom line, they are not tasked with making their people happy. And part of everything that I do, my work with CEOs and my writing, is helping people understand that they are aligned and supportive of each other. When your workers are happy, healthy, and fulfilled, you have the most innovative, strong, resilient, sustainable companies. And so I want the world to know that those goals, are intertwined.
Right, which is so interesting about this resurgence of fear-based leadership because it's counterproductive. It does not get what people say they want. I mean, so then the question is this really what you want, or do you want power? Which is a different kind of desire than a flourishing organization company.
Well, honestly, it's a lot harder to be a strengths-based leader. You have to be willing to do the work on yourself in order to be able to lead others.
Mhm.
And for people who are really deeply, deeply insecure and don't like themselves, that is very scary. I call them fear-based leaders not because they motivate others by fear, because they themselves are filled with fear. And when you wake up in the morning every day and your subconscious is saying, am I enough? Do they actually like me? Can I get this done? Will my parents ever love me? If fear is what's getting them up in the morning, it's the only way they know how to motivate others.
Mm.
And it creates this kind of nasty cycle.
Mm. Well, I'm going to encourage everybody listening to go out and get Kate's book, Unbreakable: How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders, which comes out October 28th. So just in a few weeks. And so it's available on Amazon and other places, I imagine.
Yes, definitely go check out Amazon. There's also a Kindle edition. Your local bookstores can get it through Ingram. So please give it a read. It's meant to feel like I'm sitting across the table from you as a friend.
Well, Kate, thank you so much. Take care. Kate, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, this book that you have written, and I can't wait to read it. I'm always interested in learning and growing my own toolkit because I'm on this journey of developing so that I can be a better person. I can love my neighbor and myself, my colleagues, and I am looking forward to reading it. And I hope, dear listener, you will be reading it too. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday, and you can watch this episode on YouTube at 3P Conflict Restoration. If you would like and subscribe wherever you listen or watch this podcast, it's greatly appreciated. My book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work: Tips to Ensure Failure, it looks at 80 tips of what not to do at work. And how do we bring about that healthy work environment? And of course, we need good leaders, but no matter where you are, you can start that process of how do you how do you really act professionally in your work environment and encourage others to do that as well. Our music is courtesy of Duff Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.